The silence in my parents' house was deafening, a stark contrast to its usual vibrant chaos. My niece was marrying a man who held our family in open contempt, and now half of us were boycotting the wedding after he had the audacity to demand money from my late wife's memorial fund. The fractured lines ran deep, cutting through generations of what I had always believed was unbreakable family unity. The complicated family dynamics made our relationship unique. At 32, I was only 6 years older than my niece, Hannah, who was 26. My eldest brother, Anthony, was 20 years my senior, having been born when my parents were very young. This age gap meant Hannah, and I grew up more like sisters than aunt and niece. I was the cool aunt who understood her world, the one she called at 2 a.m. to pick her up from sketchy college parties, the first person she told when she aced her law school entrance exams. We shared clothes, secrets, and dreams. Our bond felt unbreakable, forged in shared experiences and a genuine affection that transcended traditional family roles. Then she introduced James into our lives, and everything began to unravel. They met during her final year at Stanford Law School. James was pursuing his MBA at the same university, a year behind her academically, but light years ahead in arrogance and entitlement. From our very first meeting at my mother's Sunday dinner, his condescension was palpable. My family is loud, proudly Italian-American, and expresses love through food, physical affection, and boisterous gatherings. James would stand stiffly in the corner of my mother's kitchen, his expression somewhere between disgust and boredom. As my relatives hugged, argued, and celebrated around him, we made extraordinary efforts to welcome him, believing his discomfort might stem from coming from a much smaller, more reserved family. We invited him on our annual summer trip to Lake Tahoe, despite his complaints about the lack of proper amenities. We remembered his birthday with thoughtful gifts that he accepted with barely a grunt of thanks. My mother, Rosa, learned to make his favorite dessert, panna cotta, though he never once complimented her on it. He spoke to all of us as if we were intellectually inferior, explaining complex concepts we already understood with a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. My brother Anthony, Hannah's father, became his chief defender. "He's just introverted, Mia," Anthony would insist, his voice weary. "His family isn't like ours. They're more reserved. Give him time to adjust." But time only seemed to cement James's disdain. Even during a quiet, intimate dinner with just me and my husband, David, James dominated the conversation with critiques of the restaurant's wine list and unsolicited lectures on investment strategies to David, a successful contractor who built his business from scratch and knew more about real work than James ever would. The engagement should have been a joyful milestone, but it instead became a catalyst of the family rift. Hannah was radiant when she showed me the elegant diamond ring, her eyes shining with happiness. That joy was quickly tempered when I realized I wasn't going to be in the wedding party. The hurt cut deep. I had always imagined standing beside her on her big day, but I swallowed my disappointment, believing it was her choice to make. Then came the engagement party, to which our entire family was conspicuously not invited. Hannah claimed it was a small, immediate family-only affair. The social media pictures that surfaced a week later told a different story. A lavish event with at least 60 guests, including James's extended family, college friends, and work colleagues. When I confronted her, her gaze didn't waver. "I didn't handle the invitations, Aunt Mia. His mother took care of all the planning." The lie was so transparent it felt insulting. The bridal dress shopping expedition came next, and again, neither I nor my mother received an invitation. Her explanation was a strict venue limit to ensure James's mother and sisters could attend. I finally reached my breaking point and told her it felt like she was systematically replacing her birth family with his. She denied it vehemently, but when I casually asked about their future holiday plans during a family barbecue, James answered without consulting her, "We'll be spending holidays with my family Naturally, our traditions are more civilized. The incident that became the prelude to the final break was a dinner in late November. Hannah invited me and David to an upscale restaurant in the city. I was genuinely excited. It was the first time she'd initiated any one-on-one time since the engagement. The dinner was awkward, with conversations stilted and forced. James contributed little, mostly scrolling through his phone under the table. When the bill arrived, it sat between us like a silent accusation. After 15 minutes of uncomfortable silence, David reached for it. They made no move to contribute, not even a polite pretense. Then, as we were gathering our coats to leave, they announced they needed to have a serious conversation. Was there a reason you couldn't have brought this up during dinner? I asked, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Hannah twisted her napkin nervously. The wedding costs are significantly higher than we anticipated. We need financial help. Our parents can't contribute much. I was speechless for a moment, processing the audacity. Hannah, you've only been at the firm for 6 months. James has another semester of school. Why not postpone until you're both more established? James's voice was like ice. When family has a means to help, it's their obligation to do so. It's about basic familial duty. David, always the calm and rational one, patiently explained that a substantial portion of our savings was allocated for our children's education and long-term investments. We generously offered $5,000 as a wedding gift. It was then that Hannah, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, murmured, "What about the money from Aunt Sophia's fund? That's just sitting in an account, isn't it?" The air left my lungs. Sophia, my wife, my partner, the love of my life, had died after a grueling 3-year battle with breast cancer. The fund was the life insurance money I had meticulously set aside for our sons' futures, their college tuition, their first homes. To hear her invoke Sophia's name, to treat her memory as a convenient line of credit, felt like a profound betrayal. Did you really just use my dead wife's memory to try and guilt us into giving you more money? My voice was dangerously quiet, trembling with a mixture of grief and rage. James had the gall to look affronted. Is the $5,000 a serious offer? That's a fraction of what we need. It's almost insulting. Consider the offer withdrawn, David said, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. We left the restaurant, a cold, hard fury burning in the space between us. The slights continued to accumulate, each one chipping away at the foundation of our family. They skipped our traditional Christmas Eve celebration, claiming James was ill with the flu. Yet Hannah's younger brother, Ben, showed us Instagram stories of them toasting with champagne at a luxurious ski resort in Aspen with James's family. At my father's 70th birthday gala in January, a black tie optional event at a prestigious country club, James arrived 45 minutes late, dressed in a hoodie and faded jeans. When my mother, her voice quivering with the effort of maintaining grace, said, "We're so happy you could join us, James," he replied with a dismissive shrug. Hannah wouldn't stop nagging me to come. The climactic moment came during the formal family photograph. The photographer called everyone to gather, but James remained slouched in his chair. "James, come on, join the family," my father called out, his voice booming across the room. "This isn't my family," James declared, loud and clear, his words hanging in the air like a slap. My mother, the matriarch who held us all together, burst into tears. Something inside me, something that had been stretched taut for months, finally snapped. I walked across the ballroom, my heels echoing on the polished floor, every eye in the room on me. "If you have no desire to be part of this family, then get the hell out of my parents' house," I said, my voice low and shaking with a lifetime of suppressed anger. "I am done with your blatant disrespect. I am done pretending you're not a poisonous influence in my niece's life. Get out, now." He smirked, a cold, ugly expression, and stood up. Hannah immediately rose to follow him. "Hannah, if you walk out that door with him right now," I said, my heart fracturing with every word, "do not bother getting on the plane to Hawaii with us tomorrow." We had a long-planned 2-week family vacation to Maui. She froze, looked from my devastated face to James's impatient one, and slowly sat back down, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Later that night, after the guests had left and the party was ruined, the core adult members of our family, my parents, my 4 siblings, and their spouses, gathered with Hannah in my mother's formal living room. We laid our grievances bare, a painful, emotional inventory of every insult, every act of condescension, every calculated effort to isolate her from us, culminating in the grotesque request for memorial fund money. She cried, she apologized, but she also defended him. "You don't see the pressure he's under. You all judge him the second he walks in the room. He's different when it's just us." It was like speaking to someone under a spell. The next day, with heavy hearts, David and I formally declined the wedding invitation via the RSVP website. Hannah demanded a face-to-face explanation. We met at a quiet cafe near her apartment. I looked into the eyes of the girl I'd helped raise and told her the unvarnished truth. "My heart breaks, but I cannot in good conscience support this marriage, Hannah. He is not a good man. I have watched your light dim, your confidence wither. You are contorting yourself into a smaller, quieter version to fit into his cold, narrow world, and I refuse to stand there and applaud it." "You're seeing what you want to see," she whispered, her hands clenched around her coffee cup. "If you truly loved me, you'd be there for me. You'd put your feelings aside and come to my wedding." I left the cafe with a profound sense of loss. David and I spent that entire evening and well into the night talking, debating, and soul-searching. Attending the wedding felt like a betrayal of our values, of Sophia's memory, of the very concept of family we held dear. Not attending felt like we were severing our tether to Hannah, potentially abandoning her when she might need us most. We ultimately decided we could not go. I sent her a long, carefully worded email, reiterating my unconditional love for her, but also my unwavering stance. I told her our home would always be her sanctuary, but I would not financially or emotionally endorse a union I believed would cause her profound unhappiness. The fallout was swift, brutal, and divisive. My parents, after initially pleading for peace, finally reached their limit after 2 final, crushing insults. First, they discovered they were excluded from the rehearsal dinner, which was billed as wedding party only, a category that conveniently included all of James's immediate and extended family. I later learned from a gossiping cousin that James's grandparents, who were flying in from out of state, were specifically invited because they wanted to maximize time with family. I kept this painful detail to myself, unable to inflict that extra wound on my parents. Secondly, Hannah had the gall to call my mother and criticize her choice of dress for the wedding, telling her she looked frumpy and old-fashioned, and strongly suggesting she buy something new. My mother, who has impeccable style for a woman in her 70s, was devastated. She had chosen a beautiful, navy blue lace dress she had worn only once to a close friend's wedding. My father, a gentleman slow to anger, had finally had enough. He called Hannah himself, his voice firm and full of sorrow. "From the pattern of your actions and words, it is clear we are not one of participants in your celebration. Your grandmother and I will not be attending." They returned their wedding gifts, a symbolic and heartbreaking gesture. David and I did the same. Of my 4 siblings, only 2 ultimately attended. Anthony, as the father of the bride, felt a painful obligation to walk his daughter down the aisle, his heart breaking with every step. My brother Gabriel and his wife, Celia, also went, but under starkly different terms. Celia, a professional violinist, had been hired to play during the ceremony months before the major drama unfolded. Fearing a breach of contract and damage to her professional reputation, she felt compelled to fulfill the obligation. Gabriel made it abundantly clear they were attending as contractual participants, not as supportive family. He informed everyone he would be wearing jeans and a worn-out flannel shirt to the ceremony, a silent, potent protest mirroring James's disrespectful attire at our father's birthday. The wedding day itself was a somber, surreal affair for those of us who boycotted. We gathered at my parents' house, a stark counter-celebration devoid of joy. We tried to talk, to laugh, but the absence was a palpable presence in the room. The information that trickled in later painted a picture of a small, tense, and joyless event. James's family dominated the guest list. Hannah looked beautiful, but strained in the few pictures we eventually saw. There were no vibrant photos of her laughing surrounded by her cousins, no images of our large, boisterous family celebrating en masse. It was, by all accounts, James's day, and Hannah was merely an accessory in it. For months afterward, a heavy silence descended. Hannah was clearly deeply hurt, and we respected her need for space, though the distance was its own kind of agony. The first faint crack in the wall appeared around Thanksgiving. Hannah called my mother, not to extend an invitation, but to ask if she could borrow my mother's prized, professional-grade roasting pan. My mother, her hope forever resilient, agreed. When I went to retrieve the pan from Hannah and James's new high-rise apartment a few days later, the sight that greeted me was chilling. The Hannah who opened the door was a specter. She had lost a significant amount of weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, were dull and shadowed with exhaustion. The vibrant, assertive woman I knew had been erased. The apartment itself was a reflection of this change. Impeccably clean, starkly modern, and completely sterile. The colorful artwork, the framed photos of our family, the quirky trinkets from her travels, all was gone, replaced by generic, minimalist decor. It felt like a showroom, not a home. "Hi, Aunt Mia," she said, her voice flat and devoid of its usual warmth. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm just here for Grandma's roasting pan." She nodded silently and turned toward the kitchen. I followed her, my eyes taking in the unsettling perfection of the space. "How have you been?" I asked, keeping my tone light and non-confrontational. "Fine. Busy. James is under a lot of pressure at work, so it's been stressful." As she lifted the heavy pan from a lower cabinet, the sleeve of her sweater rolled up her arm. I saw it clearly, a distinct, purplish-yellow bruise, the clear imprint of fingers encircling her slender wrist. My blood turned to ice in my veins. "Hannah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what happened to your wrist?" She yanked her sleeve down so quickly it was a reflex. "It's nothing. I'm just clumsy." I walked into the edge of the bathroom door. The excuse was as flimsy and transparent as her past lies about the engagement party. I didn't push further in that moment, fearing I would scare her away. But from that day on, my vigilance was absolute. I quietly enlisted her cousins and siblings to check on her subtly, to invite her out, to keep a gentle, watchful eye. The reports were consistently alarming. She never accepted any invitations unless James was included. She missed a cousin's baby shower, a niece's dance recital, a girls' weekend at the coast. James was always a reason given. He needed her, they had plans. He didn't feel comfortable with her going alone. The final, terrifying breaking point came on a rain-lashed night in early March. My phone shattered the silence of the sleeping house at 1:17 a.m. I fumbled for it, my heart already pounding with a primal dread. It was Hannah. "Aunt Mia?" Her voice was a thin, broken thread, choked with tears and terror. Can you come get me? Please." Where are you, baby? I was already throwing back the covers, my body moving on autopilot. At the 24-hour laundromat on Harrison and 8th, I had to get out. I just had to get out. David and I drove through the pouring rain in a silence thick with fear. We found her huddled on a plastic chair inside the brightly lit, empty laundromat, shivering in a thin cardigan despite the chill. She was clutching a small, overstuffed duffel bag. When she looked up at us, the evidence was stark and undeniable. A fresh, swollen cut on her lip and a livid, red bruise blooming high on her cheekbone. She looked like a frightened animal. We didn't speak. We simply helped her into the car, wrapped her in the blanket we had brought, and drove her home, back in the warm, safe familiarity of our kitchen. With a mug of sweet tea clutched in her trembling hands, the story began to spill out in ragged, painful fragments. The control had started insidiously. Small criticisms of her friends, her family's overbearing nature, her career ambitions. It escalated to him monitoring her text messages, controlling her access to their shared bank account, dictating her schedule. The verbal and emotional abuse was a constant, corrosive drip. The physical violence had begun a few months after the wedding, always explained away as an accident or justified as a reaction to her pushing his buttons or disrespecting him. He told me no one would believe me, she whispered, staring into the depths of her mug as if it held the answers. He said you'd all just say, "I told you so." He said you had all abandoned me because you didn't approve of him, and that I had no one left but him. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it made me feel physically ill. "Oh, my darling girl," I said, wrapping my arms around her as she finally broke down into heaving sobs. "We told you we would always be here. We never abandoned you. We were just refusing to stand by and watch him tear you apart. We were waiting for you to see it for yourself." What followed was a long, difficult, and painstaking process. We helped to secure an emergency restraining order against James. We connected her with a compassionate lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases to begin the arduous process of annulment. My brother Anthony was utterly devastated, consumed by a guilt so profound it was a physical presence. He replayed every excuse he'd made, every warning sign he'd rationalized. We rallied around Hannah as a united family fortress, providing financial support, emotional shelter, and unwavering solidarity. James, of course, fought back. He contested the restraining order, portrayed himself as a victim of a manipulative wife and her interfering family. He showed up at her law firm, causing a scene that required security to intervene. He sent long, manipulative emails full of gaslighting and false promises. But Hannah, with the solid rock of her family behind her and the strength she had buried deep within herself, found the courage to stand her ground. The girl who had been so easily swayed was gone, replaced by a woman fighting for her life. It has been over a year now. Hannah lives in a bright, sunny apartment of her own, a space she is filled with her own chosen art, piles of books, and framed photographs of her family. She is in therapy, slowly untangling the complex web of trauma and rebuilding her sense of self. She laughs again, a real, deep laugh that sometimes even reaches her eyes, though the shadows of her experience will likely always remain. She is not the same person she was before James. The journey has left her wiser, more cautious, with scars that run deep in the physical ones. But she is whole again, she is safe, and she is reclaiming her life, piece by precious piece. We rarely speak of the wedding or the dark time that followed. It is a painful, closed chapter in our family's history. But sometimes, during our loud, chaotic, and loving Sunday dinners, when the conversation is overlapping and the laughter is booming and the smell of my mother's lasagna fills the house, Hannah will catch my eye from across the table. She will hold my gaze for a long moment, and a small, quiet, profoundly grateful smile will touch her lips. It is in those silent, connected moments that I know, with absolute certainty, that standing our ground was the hardest but most necessary act of love we could have ever offered her. Sometimes, the truest form of love is having the courage to say a painful no in the present, to keep the door open for a hopeful yes in the future.